My name is Carol Rushton from Southwest Prophecy Ministries, and this is the first video of our new series, Middle East Update. I want to bring you some in-depth analysis of Russia's role in Syria and the Middle East, and how all this might be related to end times Bible prophecy. When Vladimir Putin, the current president of Russia, entered the conflict in Syria, he said he was doing it to save Christians and defend Christianity in the Middle East. European news outlet AWD News reported that Putin told the Russian military on September 16, 2015, quote, "We have nearly 2 million Orthodox Christians in the Levant, Syria, and Lebanon, and approximately 5 million Christians across the Middle East. Regardless of America's presidential election outcome, the White House craves chaos in that oil-rich region by supporting fanatic Islamist organizations, i.e. ISIS, and al-Nusra Front," unquote. Putin even named Russia's military intervention in Syria Operation Salvation. In September 2014, the Washington Times quoted Putin criticizing the United States for becoming a godless nation and legalizing homosexuality. He urged the West to return to Christian values, saying, "Many Euro-Atlantic countries have moved away from their roots, including Christian values. Policies are being pursued that place on the same level a multi-child family and a same-sex partnership, a faith in God and a belief in Satan. This is the path to degradation." In his September 2015 speech at the United Nations, Putin made sure the world understood that it was Russia who would be fighting ISIS and other terrorist groups, not the United States. Russia has always been consistently fighting against terrorism in all its forms. Today, we provide military and technical assistance both to Iraq and Syria and many other countries of the region who are fighting terrorist groups. This has led some Americans, including Christian conservatives, to champion Putin as a wonderful world leader, ignoring Putin's mistresses and the suspicious deaths of Russian journalists and political opponents who have opposed him since he came to power. Even Franklin Graham, son of the famous evangelist, the Reverend Billy Graham, and now head of the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association, met with Putin on his latest visit to Russia. In the December 2015 edition of Decision magazine, Graham described his meeting with Putin in the article, "The Real Story of Christmas." Quote, "During my meeting with President Putin, we discussed the church in the Middle East and the growing dangers they face. We also talked about the critical role of the church in restraining evil and fostering biblical values in society. Thankfully, Russian leaders in the church and government have stood steadfastly against the rising homosexual agenda in their country," unquote. Franklin talked about what he found in Russia. "I was amazed at how full the churches are. The government is now giving back to the churches the land that was confiscated under communist rule." In his UN speech, Putin left out Iran, a country whose mullahs and ayatollahs threaten to wipe Israel off the face of the earth almost every day, and that financially supports Hamas, Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, and other terror groups. In fact, Breitbart News reported on September 4, 2015, the following from Iran's defense minister, Hossein Dekhan, quote, "We have often declared publicly that we will not stop material or spiritual support of Hezbollah or other resistant organizations that are fighting the U.S. and the Zionist regime, child killer Israel," unquote. I'm sure he didn't mean it, the child killer part, that is. I guess Russia's helping Iran with their peaceful nuclear program, and providing Iran with a highly advanced, sophisticated missile system just slipped Putin's mind. After Turkey shot down a Russian warplane in November, Putin accused Turkey of helping ISIS by smuggling oil for ISIS. I wouldn't be surprised if it were true. Turkey has become a radicalized Islamic country. But Russia isn't innocent either. Russia is now an ally of Iran and Syria, both supporters of Islamic terror groups. Hezbollah, the de facto power in Lebanon, is fighting with Russian troops in Syria. And while not as bad as his father, Bashar Assad of Syria is no choir boy. David Horowitz's Front Page Magazine website reported in December that at least 77% of Syrians support Hamas. Bashar Assad's father supported and harbored Middle Eastern terror groups in Syria. The Syrian support of Hamas is no accident. What has Putin done in the Middle East besides prop up Assad? In recent months, Putin has expanded economic ties with President el-Sisi in Egypt, has visited Jordan's King Abdullah, and has reached out to the King of Saudi Arabia, and has met with PLO President Mahmoud Abbas. Most of these leaders are not exactly friends of Israel. While Israel and Russia have publicly said they are cooperating, at least one Russian warplane has already violated Israel's airspace. Both the incidents with Turkey and Israel were intentional. Putin is testing the countries in the Middle East, trying to find out what they will accept and will not accept. But why? In 2005, Putin, a former KGB agent, said that the fall of the Soviet Union was the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the 20th century. Combined with everything Putin has said and done so far, well, what does all of this mean? Well, what do we remember about the Soviet Union? It was a communist country. The Soviet Union also supported the Arab nations in the Middle East during the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, and strongly opposed Israel in any war or military conflict in the region. Putin wants to restore the glory days of the old Soviet Union. He looked at President Obama's disastrous missteps in the Middle East and the chaos in Syria and saw an opportunity to restore Russia's influence in the Middle East. He roared into Syria under the pretense of saving Assad to reestablish Russia's influence in the Middle East. Putin is not Israel's friend and has demonstrated it by supporting and establishing ties with some of Israel's most vicious enemies. Whatever Israel may say publicly, privately, Israeli officials are expressing concern about the Russian military's activities on the Golan Heights. I understand that Americans want to find a good guy in all of this to support. Americans hear the stories of Iraqi and Syrian Christians being crucified and beheaded, young girls being sold as sex slaves and raped 60 times a day or more by ISIS terrorists, see our own government reject Christian refugees while accepting Muslims, and want to believe that someone is over there trying to do some good. But Russia, Turkey, Syria, Iran, the U.S., and most of the other countries and groups supporting the various sides are all in it for one thing: power. And whoever comes out on top after the smoke clears will be the master of the Middle East. The only country anyone can support in this mess is Israel. Once again, Israel is stuck in the middle of a deteriorating regional security situation, surrounded on all sides by hostile countries that want to destroy it, while trying to stop the terror attacks that have become a part of the daily life in the only Jewish country in the world. Putin is not leaving. He's in Syria to stay, and will use Syria as a base in which to expand Russia's power and influence in the Middle East. While things can change very quickly in the Middle East, it would not surprise me at all if Putin was the Russian power prophesied in Ezekiel 38. Until next time, this is Carol Rushton asking you to pray for the peace of Jerusalem.